oddly enough, nobody in our company knew that was happening because all of the layoffs going on were quiet. I actually joined Fishbowl because I kept finding people vanishing. I would go to talk to an individual on Teams and their name was gone. I didn't know what happened to them. There was never an announcement made about them being gone. I ended up getting to the fact that I had to find another way to get info. Even I believe I had 4 different VP of marketing managers while I was at the company. And when one of them was gone, there was never an announcement made to the company. People would just find out willy-nilly about how that happened.
Yeah.
So people make their own narratives. And unfortunately for this company, we all got on Fishbowl and vented, complained, gave the scoop, put the narrative the way we wanted to, because we didn't have any community and they didn't intentionally build any community for the people in the organization.
Your business's success depends on relationships with customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Karl Pontau. Each week, I'll bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week, I'm excited to connect with Ashley Amber Sava. Ashley Amber Sava is a recovering journalist with the scars and stories to prove it, courtesy of Mizzou's No Mercy J School. She has now worked in content marketing for 8 years, where she crafts words that hit harder than mid-90s power chords. She's navigated the wilds of employee comms and B2B tech, leaving her mark on scrappy Austin startups and global HR tech giants. Currently, she's a senior writer at ManyChat, where she wrestles bland messaging into submission and makes automation sound, well, human. Off the clock, Ashley's raising a gloriously spunky 8-year-old Delia with her Romanian husband, who she swears is not a vampire. Her 2 cats, Cleo and Mufasa, run the household with iron paws. Distract her with 90s grunge or book recommendations that will wreck her emotionally for weeks. She's not here to whisper sweet nothings about KPIs. If you want real, unfiltered, and maybe a little unruly, Ashley's your person. Congrats on hitting harder than mid-90s power chords, and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
I am happy to be here. You nailed that, by the way.
Thank you so much. So I know you've talked about this before on your amazing LinkedIn channel, but what happens when there's little to no internal communications at a company? What's the impact on the business?
I'm going to do it how I usually do, which is to tell a story. I don't need to name the name of the company. I'm sure everybody can figure that out. But I one time joined a company of 15,000 employees. And this was after I had been at companies that were startups. So they were 50 employees, 100 employees tops. I hadn't had the experience of what it was like to come in to a giant company. And I thought things would be a little bit different that they were. One of the things that I thought would be a little bit more nailed down was internal communications, employee communications, whatever you want to call it. I had done that at all of my other jobs along with content marketing because we just never had enough people to make it happen. But I always knew that it was important. However, this company did not have that. They had one communications generalist who probably had their plate full with external communications and couldn't nail that down. But that individual, for whatever, probably a lot of it had to do with what the higher ups made them do. We didn't have any dialogue between any of the employees, no channel to communicate about what was going on. Everything was very top-down decree. We would get maybe one email out to the whole company a month and one general all-hands meeting where you wouldn't have the opportunity to ask questions, because when you have 15,000 employees, you can't open it up for all. So what would happen was you would get told what was going on and you had no outlet of what to do with that after. And if you give people no way to talk to each other about what's going on or to ask questions or to give ideas, what happens is they'll find another way to find community and to find other humans to talk to about things. And unfortunately, in this company's case, I found out everything going on Fishbowl. If anybody doesn't know what Fishbowl is, it is owned by Glassdoor. It is an app that you can go on and join and anonymously talk about what's going on in your company. Generally, because of the anonymity factor, people are not uplifting and positive on there. They're usually venting about what's going on, complaining about the fact that they have no outlet, complaining about the fact that 15 people got laid off on their team, but oddly enough, nobody in our company knew that was happening because all of the layoffs going on were quiet. I actually joined Fishbowl because I kept finding people vanishing. I would go to talk to an individual on Teams and their name was gone. I didn't know what happened to them. There was never an announcement made about them being gone. And I ended up getting to the fact that I had to find another way to get info. Even I believe I had 4 different VP of marketing managers while I was at the company. And when one of them was gone, there was never an announcement made to the company. People would just find out willy-nilly about how that happened.
Yeah.
So people make their own narratives. And unfortunately for this company, we all got on Fishbowl and vented, complained, gave the scoop, put the narrative the way we wanted to, because we didn't have any community and they didn't intentionally build any community for the people in the organization.
That sounds like a really rough situation. And so I'm sure it must have been very stressful and hard to do good work when there was just no real communication. You're kind of floundering around a lot of the time. What was like, how did that happen? How does a company get that big without having sort of internal communications? How does that happen?
I think a lot of it was because even though it wasn't my job, and believe me, I was in a company that was very stay in your lane. They do not want you going and telling other departments how to do their job. They didn't want your input. They never asked for your input. Didn't mean I wouldn't have given it anyway. And a couple of times I did, only to be shut down immediately. But basically, I mean, I would just, I got into the company and I would ask if there were, channels for people to go to ask questions about like what happened in the all hands meeting, if there were ways that we could, provide suggestions, if we had a community channel, anything like that. A lot of the times companies that big do have an external platform for internal communications where you can get on and kind of do the dialogue thing. And anybody with you wouldn't have to be like a VP or anything to make a chat start or anything. You could be at any level and people would be engaging with you. But they just, honestly, I think they just didn't want that. They wanted a lot of control over what was going on, and they didn't want people to feel like they had the freedom to speak up because they wanted to control everything. So all of the things in the company, it took a long time to get anything done because it would have to go through like 15 to 20 rounds of approval. So a lot of the times I would have initiatives that I had launched 90 days before that were not out in public yet because they just hadn't gone through all of the tape that it needed to get anything done. I think that it was mostly just about they didn't want to have the communications because they didn't want the feedback to make them have to change any of the old ways that they were doing things. They wanted to do what they wanted to do, and they wanted people to kind of shut up.
And it's such a backwards way of doing things because in like with how fast things are going, if you start something and it takes over 90 days for it to reach the audience, it's completely irrelevant by that point, or it's completely going to miss the mark. And so it seems like by trying to over control and kind of micromanage everything to such a degree and have all these hoops to jump through, they end up shooting themselves in the foot because they can't be agile and adaptive and innovative enough to compete anymore. And it's like, and also just the constant micromanagement, especially to that kind of tiers of micromanagement, is just going to push away the best talent or the people that are the most like effective at what they do, because people leave managers, they don't leave jobs. And so it sounds like you have multiple micromanaging kind of strata built into the leadership team or the management team. I won't call it leadership because they're not really leading, they're just managing.
Yeah.
That just is a recipe for shooting their own business's success in the foot.
Well, you can tell a lot. Now I know this, but now when I join a company now, you can tell a lot about a company by how they handle the web page. And in the case of a company that big, I do understand that there needs to be protocols on who can go onto the page and update things. But people that are in content need, in my opinion, to be able to get on the web page, get their content uploaded. If they have to collaborate with design to get it done, then fine. But our entire content team was not allowed to touch anything on the web page, which means it takes 90 days to get it up, because the people that are handling that on the web team, they have a lot of other things on their plate. They didn't have nearly enough web people to handle how much new content was going up onto the web page. Or you would go on, I think they use monday.com. You go on monday.com, you would have your finalized content, and it would just be there and nothing would happen with it. And I couldn't understand why nobody was empowered. There was not one individual on my team who they thought was trusted enough to just go on and use a basic web page. Like, you just can't do that. You can't operate a business like that.
Yeah, especially that scale, and to not trust your team enough to, like, you hire them, like you said, I think you mentioned before we started recording, and I know you talked about this before, is that the company supposedly hired you because of your expertise at communication and doing what you do really well. Then they bring you on and don't want you to actually do any of these. They don't trust you to exercise that expertise. And that's got to be such a weird way to go about building a team, that you don't trust them to do what they were supposedly hired to do.
Yeah, I knew week one that I made a big mistake. And I think that is one of the most awful feelings professionally is you think everything is going to be fine and you put a lot of belief in what people tell you when they're interviewing you. And then you come in and things are not what they told you, and you know off the bat, and you're like, oh my God, what did I accept here? And funny enough, the individual who interviewed me the majority of the time, it was a long interview process, so I'm sure you could probably imagine, was gone before I got there. Like, oh, wow. That they were kind of my big advocate, and then they had vanished. And I didn't know about that until I joined. Oh, I was getting on board, and I'm like, what happened to her? Like, where did she go? And they're like, oh, she took another job. And I found her on LinkedIn, and I asked what happened and a few follow-up questions. And I did not much care for what she told me had happened. It wasn't good. And then on top of feeling bad about things not adding up, I had who I thought was my ally, and maybe she would have been my ally at the time if she would have been able to keep that job there. But yeah, she did move on to better things. And then, you have that feeling like, ugh, like the market is awful. I can't just quit now. It was already bad by the time I took that job. And I didn't want to get back out there with nothing, when your family counts on you. There's a kitty cat in the background that I just got very distracted by. I'm sorry, I pointed that out. You might have to edit that out in the recording or keep it in, because I love cats. It's very on brand for me.
That's fine. Yeah, they like cameos. Yeah, so I think for businesses that are, and because if they keep having this revolving door of people leaving and joining, it's going to kill their profits, because they keep having to rehire people, and the cost of hiring a new person and bringing them up to speed is really expensive. And so for companies that maybe the leaders are realizing, oh, we have this sort of issue, what are some steps that a business can take to start building these channels for employees to communicate and to kind of break out of the habit of micromanaging people and learning how to trust their teams better? What are some suggestions you have for how they could do that?
Well, I think you kind of have to look at the way that you operate from the top differently. You're not going to just get people, if you've always been the kind of the company who's just shouting down to people, and you haven't made it a habit before to get their input or collaborate with them or ask how they feel about items and whatnot, they're not going to believe you initially. They're going to be, little bit skeptical that anything that you're wanting to do can actually be possible. I'd be like that too. If that kind of change had happened out of the blue at that company that I left, I would have definitely been thinking like that they might be up to something. Like it wouldn't have happened for me. You have to kind of build back that with the people by modeling it. And I think being vulnerable and demonstrating that you can accept other opinions about things and then not chew people's head off for doing that. I had a discussion one time, and you would think of like me talking about it now is just absolutely ridiculous. Like you would think I made this up, but it is not. It was about emojis, which is again, like who could have had a heated discussion about an emoji? But we were talking about a campaign that was going along with the content I had made at the company. And in the campaign, I was making copy that was going to go along with a LinkedIn post. And I was new there, like maybe I'd only been there 2 or 3 weeks at that point. And I gave them the copy, and it was to go along with this international event that they went at. And in the copy for the LinkedIn post, I had included the flag of the country of the event that they were going to. And you would have thought that I had just summoned the devil. And I had no idea why everybody was mad at me. And I had people coming at me like, we don't do emojis here. They're very unprofessional. And it was just like, I was like, an emoji is unprofessional? Like, what year is this? And I asked for the guidelines. I was like, I didn't know. Do we have social media guidelines? And nobody ever gave them to me, but they all knew them in their head because they had been there for a long time. We had only 2 employees in the entire company who were allowed on LinkedIn to post on LinkedIn. You have 15,000 employees, only 2 are allowed on there. And then when I gave other ideas about social media from then on, which I should have already probably known better from that emoji thing, they had done this presentation and they were sharing it with my content team about how good they were doing. And I went through and looked at their metrics, and the only people who had liked any of the posts were employees. And I gently called that out because if all of the likes from your posts are just coming from employees, they're not actually doing anything. Like it's not an internal communications channel. And they looked at me and skipped over me and didn't comment on that. And then later on, I had multiple people on Teams message me that I was being very disrespectful and that I wasn't a team player and all of these other things. Just because I had called out that nobody liked the post, any of the posts except employees, and that we had no comments ever on anything. We didn't engage in any dialogue. And then they told me, we don't want any dialogue. There are only 2 people. How are we going to have the bandwidth to comment back to people? And I'm like, this is just like, you are completely missing the point of social media.
Yeah, that's just shows a complete misunderstanding of the point of internal communication and social media and having any sort of communication at all with internal or external people. If you're not willing to listen and not willing to be open to feedback about real performance of content or ideas from people that are actually you're paying to do the work that you're supposedly they're experts in, your business is going to be in for some rough times. And so I think it's great advice you shared about being willing to listen and just the change has to start from the top down, and really reframing the mindset from the leadership team knows what's best, and actually being vulnerable enough to and willing to put trust in the employees and give them more autonomy to be creative, to be innovative, and to be themselves that you supposedly hired them for is something that any business these days needs to be making that a priority. Otherwise, people are going to find other options because there's so many other like things people can be doing that are better like opportunities out there than working in those sort of conditions.
And even the fact, like because I hadn't been at a big company, I hadn't dealt with the political elements of a lot of it. And I didn't know that if anybody was too high of a rank, I wasn't allowed to talk to them. Nobody told me that. Oh, I got told that if I wanted to talk to this individual, I had to talk to this individual underneath them. I was not big enough to just go skip levels to talk like that. To me, like I got to the point when I was like, I don't want to play all these games. I just want to do my job. I don't want to have to figure out, like, go to this giant organization chart and figure out who is below who and who is too above me that I'm not allowed to talk to them. Like, it was very complicated to keep up with all of that. And it like put a lot of delay on things I was doing.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest motivator for like why companies need to not operate this way, is because if you're not agile enough to keep up with what's going on in the fast-paced business world that we're in, that you have to have your teams go through all these extra hoops and all this unnecessary structure to communicate valuable information or insights to higher ups. And if the higher ups aren't willing to listen, then it's like your company is going to get surpassed by competitors every single day of the week, and you're going to be out of business so fast. And just that sort of mindset just does not work anymore.
I always think about it like the fact that I hope anybody that I've ever hired, that I picked them because I know that they're capable. They can do a thing that I can't do usually. And even if it is a thing that I can do, they add completely different value than I do. Your team has ideas, let them bring them to the table. I don't think it's a good idea to just reward mediocrity and sheep. I think we need to kind of let people get out of the box and celebrate creativity, even the wild half-baked ideas, like especially the wild half-baked ideas. If you want people to care, you need to give them a space to create without fear of being slapped down. Like, I felt like I was a mole in the whack-a-mole game.
Yeah, I think that's a great takeaway there. If you want your business to succeed, you need to open up communication and give people opportunities to be creative and float ideas and be willing to speak out without the risk of being stomped down by someone who's quote unquote higher up than they are. So thank you so much for connecting with me today, Ashley. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection podcast, please leave a review, and share it. If you'd like to connect with myself or Ashley, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.
Thank you.